Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content and is recorded in advance. The following episode was originally recorded on July 12th, 2021. Listener discretion is advised.
So you were in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah?
Were you in the shit?
Yeah, I was in the shit.
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me, I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome once again to the New Way podcast, where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. I'm your host, Matt Sheng, joined in studio by Mr. Benjamin Scott Wilson.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hello. We have just returned from the movie theater. Theater, complete with popcorn and previews and all the trappings, and we're gonna get into that later in this podcast. Here,
I wish that I had saved this, return to the theaters. Technically, on Tuesday of this past week, I did take my daughters to see The Goonies on a single screen theater in Hilton Head.
Wow.
But the film print broke like 30 seconds in, so they just played it from a Blu-ray and projected it. So I think that seeing Black Widow is definitely more of I think that was a technicality. I think this is the true return to cinema.
Well, and we were in the XD, and same for me. I saw In the Heights, but that was a private screening, and so yeah, I'm going to count this one as the official return to the theaters, and we're going to definitely get into Black Widow.
This is us watching it with the normies.
Yeah, exactly. Of just being in the theater, not a packed theater, but enough people in there to hear a chuckle or two at some of the funnier lines in it.
Yeah, there were definitely some dad jokes in there that I think that
I appreciated them a lot. I am not a dad, but I appreciated them a lot. Before we get into that, I do want to discuss something that Mr. Nick Santacroce and I watched last week whilst he was in town. That I really want to recommend to you and to our audience. And I don't know, you may have actually watched some of this. I'm not sure, but I don't believe we ever talked about it. But we were looking for something to put on and was going through some stuff on Peacock, as I'm a fan of the Peacock. And shut up.
Okay.
Shut up, Ben. You know what? Actually, Ben, you just reminded me. There's a new feature on the soundboard that they just activated where I can actually bleep you out when I don't like what you're. So, just start talking, Ben.
Matt, you are one handsome mother.
Oh wait, that didn't work right. Why is that not working right?
You have to hold it.
I am. Oh, but it's doing the other sound. I see why. It's supposed to do the bleep. But whatever. I'll get it working better some other time. I totally thought that was the way it should have done this, but whatever. Whatever. Anywho, yeah. So we put on the Saved by the Bell reboot, and I have got to say it is phenomenally well done and far better than anyone should expect or that it should be. It is far superior to the show that it is rebooting in every conceivable way. And I'll tell you why. One of the reasons it's good, because the producers were smart, and we were Nick and I were kind of like saying what kind of the makeup of this show, and I would say that it is half Cobra Kai, half the Brady Bunch movie, with a liberal dose of Zach Morris's trash via kind of the 30 Rock Lorne Michaels team. And the reason why it is some of that is that the Zach Morris's trash creator was hired as a writer on the show.
Oh, interesting.
A staff writer, and wrote one of the 9 episodes or 10 episodes himself.
Or was a lead writer on one of those.
Yes, correct. But it addresses every failing of the original while embracing some of the cheesiness and making a multicultural cast and pretty much everything done super right. With one exception, it has maybe the worst theme song I've ever heard in my entire life. It is so heinously bad, especially in comparison to how great the show is, that Nick and I were like, how did this happen?
It was worse than the theme song of Small Wonder.
It is everything. I didn't even load it because I can't bear to listen to it again. But go ahead and look up Saved by the Bell reboot theme song if you want, or honestly watch the show. It is really fucking funny and good.
I've heard that it is very good, and that it definitely approaches it in a way where, you know, it's got to be self-referential. It's got to be just on that kind of cusp of you know, self-parody.
Yes.
But it writes itself seriously, which is, I mean, honestly, that's the reason why Cobra Kai has a following and became popular, is just because it learned how to kind of skate that line right in between kind of parodying and realizing that the originals are kind of ridiculous and are totally a product of their age, you know, and that the Karate Kid 1984 or whatever, while also trying to say, hey, we can do fun stuff with new characters and we can, you know, introduce these new components and actually make compelling television while still doing that, and make a dramatic show, like, while still kind of poking fun of itself. And honestly, I think that Cobra Kai it's starting to wear on me a little bit now. The last season was a little bit of kind of, you know, whatever. But I do think that they did they made a pretty good template for shows that want to go back and kind of revisit their roots, which is like everything now.
Yeah, and I think this show absolutely, it's much sillier because the show it's based on is much sillier than a film trilogy that was semi-serious. I mean, very serious. Actually,
Very
if you
serious,
take the first one for sure. But yeah, there's a little. I felt a lot of that Brady Bunch movie, which I think is another one that embraces and draws attention while making its kind of own thing. And then there's just some really smart choices. Like
that's a really interesting pull, the Brady Bunch movie, just because it was so weird. That came out. When it came out, the only thing that was close to it was maybe Coneheads.
Yeah.
Or maybe The Addams Family. But it was just such a strange film to come out, like, whatever it was, 96, where it came out. And it was so self-referential and just so bizarre. And it ended up working completely.
Yeah, I mean, they leaned. I mean, it's one of those that part of it is built for the fans. So there's all kinds of Easter eggs and toss-ups for things that they remember. And making Jan, like, psychotic is fucking great.
No, of course.
But yeah, and there's some smart choices, I think, in Saved by the Bell of, like, there's a trans character, but it's not, like, the identity. And she's kind of a bitch. And they lean into it. So there's not, like, even though everyone eventually has some sort of redeeming qualities, they lean really hard in her being a kind of a villainous character in it and not, like, shying away from that in the show.
Yeah, I think they did something kind of similar to that on the Candidate. What was the thing with oh
shit, what is it called? I know what you're talking about. The politician. The politician?
Well, the politician, yeah. The HBO sort of what was supposed to be a limited series that then turned into
it's similar things going on in this. But yeah, it's I highly recommend it. I mean, and I don't think you even need to have some sort of love affair with the original show. I certainly don't necessarily.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, Nick, who we wish was on the show, I mean, obviously has a love affair with. I I just think he has unrequited sexual repression when it comes to Zach Morris. But
I thought you were going to say Kelly Kapowski, but I think you're correct. Mine is Mario Lopez. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, Slater. Come on. But he loves and has always actively loved Saved by the Bell, but I was just never interested in Saved by the Bell at all growing up. I didn't really find it funny or interesting.
No, I have fondness. I mean, I was when that show started, I was in high school. You know,
sure.
It was like there's a fondness, but no, it was not a good show. The same reason I never watched the Full House reboot is I didn't really like Full House.
However, for the past 10 years, I've tried to convince people who I play music with to name our band Good Morning Miss Bliss, because that is the best fucking band name ever. Good Morning Miss Bliss.
In case some of you out there don't know, that was the original title of Saved by the Bell for the first season. Yeah.
Yeah,
kind of unofficial title. But yeah, I recommend it. I think you should watch it. The other thing I want to talk about to kind of lead directly into this podcast, because and spoiler alert, Ben, I did watch the first like 10 minutes of Black Widow last night, and then didn't, because we were going to watch the movie last night.
Yes.
And we rescheduled for tonight, and decided we were going to do this podcast. It kind of ties in, so I kind of want to just get a feel of it, and I'm glad I did, because one of the things I really want to talk about with this film, and it's something I think Marvel does exceedingly well, and it's kind of a topic we haven't really hit so much, is cold opens in films, and really good, powerful cold opens. And
I still think, to date, the best cold open in the Marvel universe is Guardians of the Galaxy.
I 100% agree.
Which totally sets the tone for that movie. It's a very serious, hyper serious note. It's probably one of the more serious sequences ever in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's essentially the preface for a film that's very goofy and so you want to have that grounding moment at the beginning, because then you're like, no matter how goofy you get or how sort of outside of the box you get, you got that sort of basis to kind of come back to.
Well, and I mean, and you're also looking at it, it's the only scene in the entire movie that takes place on Earth. So it is the Earthbound moment, the part that's supposed to connect with the audience before we go to space, which was kind of, I mean, we'd been to Asgard, which we now admit is space, but back then it was kind of like, is this the mystical, whatever it is? So it was really embracing that. But yeah,
is this heaven?
And I think, I mean, there are other really good Marvel openings. I think the Iron Man cold open is another great one, that just from a character introduction standpoint, for an audience that didn't know who the fuck Tony Stark was or what Iron Man was at all. I mean, I had friends that were into comics. I didn't know shit about. I didn't know the name Tony Stark until that movie came about. So I think that does a great job in the Humvee of setting that up. And there's other really good ones. Civil War's got a great one that doesn't really pay off until the end, but it's the Winter Soldier killing Tony Stark's parents. But you don't know that, spoiler alert. But I will say, and I will keep spoilers to a minimum on Black Widow, although I don't really feel there's anything in the movie that is ruined by discussion or spoilers.
I kind of glanced past some of the reviews of Black Widow, but I wanted to go into it kind of as, clean as possible, without having a bunch of outside influence. But I did realize, I think one of the little blurbs I saw on like Rotten Tomatoes was that you have a hard time maybe with this movie just because if you're really invested in the MCU, you're cheering for somebody who you know is dead. And so, that's kind of the catch-22 of doing a Black Widow movie, which is totally deserved. Black Widow's an amazing character. Scarlett Johansson's fucking awesome. But we saw this character die. Sure. And so we know that this is kind of a flashback, retrospects, retcon, whatever you want to call it. I did not have any of that feeling watching the movie at all. And I thought one of the reasons why was because the cold open was so well done. I would say it's not quite Guardians level. It's just below it.
It is right there.
It's the second best cold open that Marvel has done. And they did a really great job of doing, even though it's not required to do a lot of it, Rachel Weisz and David Harbour are both in the scene, and they are de-aged just slightly, just enough to make it so it's 1995 accurate.
Yes.
Although I did find it funny, to me, the girl who played the young Scarlett Johansson just looked exactly like Mila Jovovich, and I was like,
I thought she looked just like Scarlett. I thought that like she was dead on.
Oh, I was like, is this like young? Did it just de-age Mila Jovovich?
You were it's because you were preparing for what we're going to get to in the podcast with Mila, but
maybe
a little bit.
Maybe Mila was on the brain.
Yeah,
but no,
she's always on the brain with Ben Wilson.
That's totally true. But no, I would say that. I mean, what's your honest take on the movie, Matt?
I mean, I really can't emphasize enough that kind of that opening sequence, and it does set something else in that I will say. If I describe this movie in one word, and especially amongst the MCU, it is by far the most brutal MCU movie we have had to date. It is, everything about it is brutal, and not just from a pain and violence standpoint. And of course, it's PG-13, so there's no blood with this violence, but there are some disturbing kind of abuse of people in it. And the opening scene is children in peril in a very real way that is very frightening, which is a theme of the movie. And they take that to heart, that this movie is about the Black Widow program, which is taking these young girls.
I mean, obviously there's a huge kind of underline of like sex trafficking and the exploitation of young children, especially young girls. So I mean, that's a clear through line. Yeah. My word for it is, and it's totally a good thing for a Marvel movie, is different. It is way different than any other Marvel movie.
It is their Bond movie via John Wick. Like it is very much. I mean, they even have a Bond. They have her watching Moonraker in the beginning. So obviously, like it was clearly on their brains.
Well, because I've heard comparisons of it to Winter Soldier, which I think,
not at all. I don't agree with that.
And I don't agree with it at all either, because Winter Soldier to me felt like this. I don't know. It wasn't anti-establishment, but it was basically kind of this. We're really going to stick something like a cog on the wheels and watch this system this thing that's been built up, through the Avengers movies kind of fall down. Where this felt a lot more like you said, like a Bond movie or like a.
Mission Impossible.
Lots of Mission Impossible. Yeah, I mean, it could have been. I mean, this movie. If you had replaced, like, Scarlett Johansson with Tom Cruise, you would have had a Mission Impossible movie. I mean, that's what I mean.
I mean, for once, it would be Scarlett Johansson being played by a white man instead
of touche. I think that it was, but I think that was a good move. I mean, because what you made was basically kind of a late 2000s, just post second Avenger. I guess it was technically 2014 or whenever it was that it was supposed to take place, but it felt unique in the world of the MCU. It didn't feel super fantastical, and even like the ridiculous set piece at the end, which went a little over the top, still felt pretty earned. I didn't feel like
there were a few. Oh, that's why I say it's Bond.
The third act was a little jittery, because that was the thing, is we were getting towards the end of the second act, and I was like, damn, this is like one of the best Marvel. Like, this is definitely top 5 Marvel movie for me.
Yeah.
And then the third act kind of lost me a little bit, but it's hard, man. It's hard to hate a movie with that cast.
And there's a scene towards the end of it with Ray Winstone and Scarlett Johansson where she is pulling off some fucking phenomenal double duty in a bunch of different ways. I won't spoil any more than that, but the casting is so good. Florence Pugh is fucking phenomenal in it.
That was another complaint that I read, was that why do we make a Black Widow movie and then the best thing in it is her sister, which is Florence Pugh, and I kind of agree with that, because Florence Pugh definitely shines the brightest in the movie. She is definitely kind of the movie doesn't work without her. I don't think.
But I mean, I think that's the same complaint you have of things with like Hamilton or Jesus Christ Superstar, where your main character is maybe not quite as showy as it, but the other characters don't work unless you have that anchor like Scarlett Johansson.
Exactly. And the other thing is Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow. This is a well-established character, so you have this shiny new toy that shows up on screen. And
I guarantee Florence Pugh watched at least one season of Orphan Black, because she is very much that Tatiana Maslany, Russian character. And in fact, Scarlett Johansson says Sestra at the end, which is like a big thing in Orphan Black. But I definitely felt that from her. But yeah, I mean, and David Harbour also just fucking, of course, delivering on everything.
And Rachel Weisz is amazing as always.
Really, everybody does exactly what you want them to be doing in that film.
Ironically, the one person I thought was slightly miscast was Ray Winstone, and I love Ray Winstone.
I mean, he was doing his best. What is the actor from?
To me, he was
Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Bob Hoskins.
He
was
his
doing
best
Bob Hoskins in that Jet Li movie in 2000 from 2004.
That's why I liked it.
That's my dog.
Yeah, he was doing Unleashed. He was playing Russian Unleashed.
That's so funny that we both went Bob Hoskins on that.
He's undeniably Bob Hoskins. If I didn't know Bob Hoskins was dead, I would have thought that was Bob Hoskins. But I mean, listen, he's the Bond villain of the movie. He is exactly what this movie is so Bondian. Like, there's no way to get past.
Yeah,
that.
I would have. That's the one thing I definitely would have changed about the movie is I wish that he had been a smarmier, more of the, like, if you're gonna go full Bond, go do the actual, like, Skyfall and have it be a Benicio del Toro or somebody who's very slick, you know, kind of doing the.
I mean, he grossed me out, but apparently not gross enough for Ben Wilson. Ben Wilson says, "Give me grosser." Hey, can we get one more take, Ray? Just grosser, like just much grosser.
And the thing is, I really like Ray Winstone. I think that he's a fantastic actor. But yeah, for me, it felt a little. Maybe it's because it seemed like such an overt Bond stereotype villain. But I mean, honestly, considering that that's kind of my complaint about the movie.
Yeah.
It was different. It was very much off the beaten path for and again, I've never been someone who agrees with, like, oh, all MCU movies are the same. I've never been in that camp ever. But this should be just further proof. Like, they put the creatives in charge and they say, okay, do this is kind of our proof of concept, do this thing. And it's way different than anything else that they've put out. Cast exceptionally well, acted exceptionally well, and the set pieces all work. It was filmed really well. And one of the things that we said as we were exiting the theater before I was like, we shouldn't talk about this until we get on air, is the score is definitely one of the best Marvel scores.
The Taskmaster theme especially is just a fucking great thing, but all of the Russian vibes with it as well. There's a lot to like in this. I think it's a great return to the MCU.
I had never really I never looked into the guy who scored it.
I think it's a female that scored it. I'm not sure.
Girl who scored it. Whoever scored it, I'm just interested if they're Russian, because there was so much Russian influence, obviously, in the score.
Well, I go and look this up on IMDb. I'm also reminded of something that made us laugh really hard in the theater during the credits. There is a special thanks.
You mean besides the old trailer?
Oh, God Almighty! There were some bad trailers in front of this movie. No,
we're like, oh, well, back to the movies.
But our thing was there was a special thanks to Ralph Macchio in the credits, and we were like, "What the fuck?" And I'm wondering if maybe it's in the, because I noticed they had the DuckTales thing. Like, maybe in the training montage there was a Karate Kid thing we missed.
I think I would have seen that.
I don't.
Special thanks to Ralph Macchio. It would be funny if he was the only person that got special thanks.
Just for his support.
Just was like, thank you for existing, Ralph Macchio.
Okay, the music is by someone named Lorne Bell.
Well, I was about to say Bourne, but
Lorne, and my internet apparently is just freezing on finding out what else this. I don't know if it's man or woman. Okay, it is a man. He did okay. So he's done a lot of the Mission Impossibles.
Okay, well, so this makes sense.
It looks like he may have done some work on WandaVision, his Dark Materials, lots
good
of
music in his
lots of things here actually. So yeah, it's a great score. It's a phenomenally good score.
Yeah,
and noticeably good.
A very, very solid theme and lots of, like, fun little kind of flourishes and throwbacks to kind of the Russian sort of Russian style.
Yes. So this gets 2 pints up or whatever our what is our, if we were to make a last that's not we are not doing 2 dicks. I think we have made that joke on the show before.
Oh no, he's totally, that's the reason why I made the joke.
God damn it. We need an actual rating system for the last pint that's beer related. Like
I would give this 3 out of 4 pints.
3 out of 4 pints. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a solid 3 out of 4 pints.
It's a definitely a 3-star movie and totally enjoyable, totally cool. I will absolutely watch it again. I'm not sure I could watch it with my kids.
I was just gonna say, if you do have kids, because normally, like, I would recommend, like, I could tell you, Ben, to watch Wonder Woman with your kids, and that would be okay.
We've watched Wonder Woman. We've watched Guardians of the Galaxy.
This
I took them to see the Goonies.
It's violent.
It's rough. It's got some strange body horror parts in it that are very.
It is brutal. Like, I was shying away at moments on the screen that were just very.
It was pretty yucky.
That one, there's very early on in it, someone gets gutted. Now, of course, again, it is PG-13, so there's no blood from it, but it is a violent act.
Yeah, that was rough.
So yeah, maybe not for the little ones, but I think your parents are gonna enjoy it.
After the kids go to bed.
That's right.
Put on that Black Widow.
So in honor of Black Widow and our return to the cinemas, Ben and I were trying to figure out what would be a good podcast to record just post this movie, and the idea came to us that we have not really.
Came to you. That's smart.
We have not tackled female-led action vehicles, or female action stars, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. And there are a lot, and I'm curious to go kind of through the history of this, because we did a history of action movies in one of our podcasts, and we kind of talked about that transition from like swashbucklers to war movies to westerns and then into the modern action thing. And I don't know if we covered it in that, but there is a portion I think we might have missed that I didn't really think about until this podcast, because I was trying to think of who's like the first kick-ass female action star. And I'm like, man, I don't think we talked about the blaxploitation movies. And the first one that popped in my head here was Pam Grier.
Pam Grier.
Oh my God.
Foxy Brown.
I remember there's a funny interview with Eddie Murphy when he was she played his mom in what was that terrible movie, Pluto Nash. And he's like,
oh really?
And he goes we met on set, and he goes, the first thing I said to her was like, you were the first titties I ever saw, and I was obsessed. Like, he's like, that was their discussion. And I'm like, funny. That's kind of amazing. But yeah, I mean, Pam Grier is, I think, the OG ass kicker. Right?
Yeah, I think you're right, because you didn't really have, because action movies back in those days, especially if you're looking at like the 50s and 60s, were primarily westerns.
Yeah.
And until you got to like the Bullets and the French Connections and the things like that, the late 60s and early 70s, and sort of the influx of the French New Wave, kind of doing some unhinged stuff with cop drama, Serpico, things along those lines. But all of those were also sort of typecast of like disgruntled ex-cops,
disgruntled white guy,
disgruntled white guys. And really, I think that it was sort of the blaxploitation period where it was like, well, we can do revenge movies, but we can do them with empowered women. And I think it's really interesting that was that sort of set the standard. That said, I think that once you started getting to the late 70s and early 80s, obviously women in action films began they started to become a little bit more prevalent.
Yes.
And they also kind of diverged in a bunch of different ways, which I think is kind of interesting. And that's one of the things that I briefly looked it up online. It was like, female action stars or action movies. And obviously, if you've listened to a single episode of this podcast, you've heard me bring up Alien and Aliens. I don't consider Ripley in Alien an action star at all. She is more of a commander.
She's a survivor.
Ripley in Aliens is absolutely a fucking badass action
it's because
star.
You've got one of those is a horror movie and one of them's an action movie.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like everyone brings up Alien. I'm just like, no, I don't consider Ripley. Ripley is terrified for the majority of that movie, and she just does what she has to do to survive. Well, and Survivors is exactly the right word.
It is kind of funny though, because you watch the evolution. So you've got in the 80s you have two main female action stars. You've got Linda Hamilton and you've got Sigourney Weaver.
But again, Linda Hamilton didn't become a real action star until 1991 when T2 came out.
Yes.
Again, she was more of a survivor in the first movie,
which is interesting again because you're looking at James Cameron's evolution and going from like, hey, I have this strong female character in this movie. Now I'm doing an action movie where I have an action star, and now I'm going to do another movie, and that's his follow-up is to do that.
I also find it, and we can get into this a little bit more if you want to, but I find it really interesting that if you look at the history of strong female-driven action films, they are directed by men who are known to be problematic.
That is very interesting. That is very interesting and very terrible, but very interesting.
It is. I found it really interesting because I was just like, wow. I mean, like you look at the James Camerons and the Joss Whedons of the world and the people who, I'm a feminist. I put my female character front and center. It's like, are you overcompensating for something a little bit? It's pretty interesting.
I think probably what you're looking at though is more of that hubris of like, instead of putting, so you look at Woody Allen makes movies and he puts a man as a stand-in for Woody Allen in every one of his movies, and this is the Woody Allen character, and this
a
is
lot of his movies, not all of his movies,
a good amount of them, right? And you have that in other filmmakers as well. You have Christopher Nolan and Martin Scorsese using DiCaprio over and over again to be their surrogates and things like that.
Sure.
So I think some of these guys that are just so overtly just machismo are doing the same thing, but they think they're subverting it by making the I can make the female
right,
the badass Cameron character is going to be Linda Hamilton, and Joss Whedon's going to do Firefly and everything.
And James Cameron was married to Linda Hamilton.
He
so.
certainly was, and then not,
and then none.
But yeah, I that's a really interesting point. I'm sure there's some fascinating psychology behind it.
Yeah, I mean, but it does. And I think it's just reflective of the period where the 80s were definitely the time when people realized, hey, like women, can absolutely be sort of front and center and be kind of the linchpin of a franchise or of this. And ironically, I mean, you had even directors themselves like James Cameron kind of playing on those archetypes. Cameron played on his own archetypes by making True Lies, which was basically like, hey, we've got this woman. Ultimately, Jamie Lee Curtis is more important in that movie than Arnold Schwarzenegger is.
Yes.
As kind of the linchpin of the movie. I mean, she's ultimately the one who's doing the heavy lifting there. And so I do think it's interesting that the 80s were definitely a time when they were like, hey, we have like women can be super powerful, super super aggressive, super they can be your anchor of movies. And I think that there are a few actors that could pull it off. Sigourney Weaver, obviously Aliens. Gina Davis did a lot in quite a few movies, actually, into the mid 90s.
It was kind of interesting though, because I think you felt that presence in the 80s, like it was breaking through this thing, and then you get to the 90s, and really it was just more Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver carrying on these characters that were becoming kind of female empowerment. I think Gina Davis is a great one, but then I think there's a drop off that happens for a large part of the 90s for that until you get into the early 2000s, and then it hits hardcore.
Well,
again.
So I think that the female action lead role changed in 1990 when La Femme Nikita came out. Luc Besson. So Luc Besson released La Femme Nikita, which basically turned a sort of prostitute, a woman who was down on her luck, who was, kind of a drug abuser, all that type of stuff, and turned her into an assassin. And it became this very kind of sexy, overtly stylized action kind of set piece film. And
then a bad USA show for many years.
Yeah, that's right. I completely forgot it was a show in the 90s. But Luc Besson went on to do Leon the Professional, which has Natalie Portman as the female protagonist in that movie, who I think it still kind of exists in the same world. And then, of course, Mila Jovovich in The Fifth Element, and then Mila Jovovich in everything after. is kind of. I think that Luke. I don't see the modern female action star being what it is today without Luc Besson. Luc Besson really did a lot sort of for the architecture of that.
So I have a question, and maybe it's just been a while. But I don't think so. I think we remember more. So I agree that Mila Jovovich has become a massive action star, but I don't feel that Fifth Element is an action vehicle for her.
No.
At all. And it's kind of interesting. It is a very powerful female character, but it is also a somewhat...
She's the ultimate weapon.
She is, but she doesn't ever... She does sometimes.
She has the one kick-ass...
She's the one kick-ass
the 3-minute...
Yes.
You know,
and then the rest of it is like learning English and... and which I love.
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
I do love that. But yeah, it is interesting. I think... I feel that there was like a growing acceptance towards these because we also at this point, so we've got Aliens, and I would say Sigourney Weaver is a very solid lead, but she also has a huge fucking cast around her in that movie. And Linda Hamilton in Terminator is not the lead. It's
John Connor.
Yeah, you've got John, and you've got Schwarzenegger, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
so you're looking at these, and I don't think we get to these other. And La Femme Nikita, I think, is a great example of where you actually do have a thing, but it also is a foreign. It was not a blockbuster U.S. hit.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge hit. I mean, for one period of time, it was the highest grossing French film of all time.
But again, it was not Tomb Raider, right? And where we get to in the early 2000s, we start to see these truly female-led flicks.
But the thing is I see you can watch La Femme Nikita now, or Nikita. It was just called Nikita in France.
Yeah.
And you can see Lucy, like Luc Besson did
Sure.
Lucy 6 or 7 years ago, or whatever. Or you can see Black Widow. I mean, that is La Femme Nikita. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is. It's the architecture that's been well established. Of this is what you do with a lead action vehicle. I don't consider, Angelina Jolie doing Tomb Raider. That was just The Mummy to me. I mean, it was basically just, we took this popular property and we put a woman, in the lead role. That doesn't register for me as far as quality is concerned.
Oh no, Please, I am not talking quality. First of all, I've barely seen either of the two Tomb Raider movies, the original ones. I consider them to be the national treasure of their time.
You only saw what existed between the waist and the neck.
That's right. I was a very narrow viewing window, and it was phenomenal. Now, I think that you look at a lot at success of films and that as far as what paves the way to allow more of those movies to be made and things to go. And for a long time, that people just shied away from a female-led action vehicle. Now, you're right. Tomb Raider's an easy step because it's based off an existing property, but it's still we didn't get a lot of those things necessarily where it was like, oh, she's going to be the Schwarzenegger, or she's going to be the Stallone, this kind of idea. And then I think the 2000s really starts to run with that in a lot of these movies that we were seeing. And then between 2010 and now is where a lot of these hit. But I mean, I think your heir apparent on the Pam Grier side happens via Tarantino. With Kill Bill and Uma Thurman, and also just everyone else in that film, that all of the snakes that what is it called, what are they're called, I mean, they all have snake names, but they have a name, like the group, right?
I forget what they're called.
But I mean, that's another movie that's hanging on this female lead. And what's also great, and it's sort of sad, but it is very true, is that all of these female-led action vehicles give you such a better depth of character in general. Despite me loving the Bond movies and Mission Impossible, there's not much soul there necessarily. There's interesting things, and they're watching their brains work and kind of that side of it, but there's not a lot of this kind of emotional pull. They get there a little bit, but that's one of the reasons why a lot of these the female-led action movies work great, is they're not afraid to embrace what is the emotion or the backstory or the building of this character? How did they become like this? And Black Widow's a great example as well. It really goes into your backstory of multiple female characters in 3 different generations.
Well, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I think that's what happened with Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver and the Terminator and the Alien franchises, respectively, is that you had the previous movie to build on. So you're like, this person's fucked up because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So how are they going to respond to it? Well, they become badasses, and it is just really interesting that they, in Commando, Schwarzenegger can show up, and you see him and you're just like, well, that guy's a badass. But it's like in those early female-led action movies, it's almost like you have to explain it away. Like a woman just can't show up and be a badass. No, they have to have an entire movie's worth of like character development.
What's even funnier, and I Commando's such a fun one to bring up, because Commando is supposed to open with this like touching father and daughter thing, and he's this gigantic Hulk of a human being, so there's no question at any point. And I think this is something I really wanted to bring up that I'm kind of curious about, or I kind of want to address or discuss, is because there are a lot of people out there still, sadly to this day, that I don't need females in these action movies. Why they keep trying to force this down our throats? And these same people are lining up to. There's a Liam Neeson. There's
the people who got mad at Avengers Endgame, where all the women showed up in like the one frame.
And these same people are keeping
stupid.
There's a new there are 2 Liam Neeson ice trucker action movies that have come out in the last 3 years. He is 69 years old. He is an old man. And listen, I love Liam Neeson and I think it's great. He's at this career resurgence of bizarre action hero and how that happens. But if we're gonna buy that 100 times,
he's not doing
over,
it anymore.
Yeah, thank God, dude. I love Liam Neeson, but you're better than this.
He did Wanted and made like $1 billion fucking dollars, and he had points on that movie, and then realized he was like, well, I could make $80 million every single movie I do.
He has made 37 Taken movies. They have different titles, and they're not the same character, but they are Taken movies over and over and over and over again.
Right.
But did
I say Wanted or Taken?
I think you said Wanted. Wanted is one I actually didn't want to talk about on this with another Angelina Jolie kind of action-led flick.
Yeah, directed by Timur Bekmambetov.
That was the better than I could have done on that name, but that was impressive. But yeah, I always think that that's kind of interesting that you can have this backlash against strong female leads and female-led action movies, and then we give a pass to all of these fucking unlikely man hero movies. Are just sort of ridiculous.
I would always bring it back to, like, people are just like, oh, they're trying to shove it down your throats, this, liberal agenda, you got, women fronting all these movies and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay, so we've changed from the 70s where 98% of all movies were made with a white male lead, and now it's 81%. 81%.
Too much, Ben.
Too much
diversity.
That 19%, man.
Too much diversity.
Just too much.
I can't handle this.
I'm just like, what the fuck? I mean,
our podcast used to be 90% about white men, and lately
look who the top
we're woke.
20 highest paid actors in the world are. And yeah, you're gonna see The Rock on there, but you're not gonna see a whole lot of diversity on there.
No.
So
it's interesting, and I kind of want to go through, and that's another thing also when you look at kind of the set of women that have made it. Yes, there are a lot of white women, but we have somebody like Michelle Yeoh, who I think is another like big kind of was an action star from Crouching Tiger, and then moved over to.
I mean, she was a Hong Kong action star well before that. So.
But yeah, I think there's more acceptance for that in kind of the female-led thing as well.
Totally.
But yeah, so once we get into kind of the 2000s, and you have That you're getting the Resident Evil movies with Mila Jovovich, the Underworld movies with Kate Beckinsale, which I told Ben I have not seen either of those franchises. I've seen scenes, but not full movie.
Joke's on you, we're watching Resident Evil right now.
God damn it. I can't handle that right now. But then you also...
Gonna be here till 2 a.m.
Well, and then I think it's funny also to watch some of these transitions of actresses. So, like, somebody like Halle Berry is not really utilized action well in the X-Men movies. And she gets Catwoman, which is god-awful terrible. But in the last 2 years, she shows up in John Wick and fucking...
Yeah, she owns it.
Owns every bit that she's in that movie, enough so that I'm sure at some point there will be a spin-off with her character.
Yeah, they've talked about it.
And then you have, I think, the one that I think is just embracing this to huge effect that I never would have thought is Charlize Theron.
Yeah, Charlize Theron is like the new action.
She's the
goddess.
She's the queen. Like there is like she. I mean, she had a long way from Aeon Flux at this point.
Well, and that's the thing is like she did Aeon Flux in the mid 2000s, and we're talking about an Oscar-winning actress who did a widely panned movie, and then didn't do action again for a long time.
Yeah.
And what does it take? It takes George Miller and Mad Max Fury Road, and one of the best action movies ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that Mad Max Fury Road. You know what? I think that
Furry Road.
Furry Road.
that's the porn version of it.
I want to see that one.
I don't. I can't watch that one either.
It was. You know what was funny though is it was on TV the other day, and it's one of those movies that when it's on, like if it's on HBO, if it's whatever, I have to switch over to it. I have to start watching it. I think I think it's broken my top 10. I think that Mad Max Fury Road is one of my top 10 movies of all time. It's so good, and Charlize Theron then had this career resurgence, basically. Like, oh yeah, she was fucking hurting, for work. Multiple Academy Award nominee, Academy Award winning actress. And she's all of a sudden like the new fucking like action god.
And I appreciate also, because I've listened to interviews with her where she's promoting stuff like Atomic Blonde, and like
Old Guard, or
yeah,
like,
and just talking about like she's like I'm in a fucking ice bath like every night. I am in agony, but like it's worth it. Like she's like, it looked good on screen, right? Like as long as it looked good on screen, then it's fucking worth it.
It seems like she, and this is I don't want to put words in Charlize Theron's mouth.
She will beat your ass if you do that.
She probably would. She's had enough training. It seems like she's really embracing kind of her physicality and understanding like, hey, I'm in my 40s. I'm not going to be able to do this forever, which honestly is kind of what I felt like Tom Cruise was doing in the early 2000s. And then we realized that Tom Cruise will never die.
He is,
and is just insane.
He's perpetually 42.
Yeah, exactly.
And he will ride that until he's 90, and then he'll just die. He'll disappear Obi-Wan style during a Mission Impossible stunt.
He's all of a sudden like he's going to be in a Mission Impossible movie, and then a year later he's going to look like Paul Newman in Road to Perdition. And he's just going to just age 30 years overnight, and then he's going to win an Academy Award, and then he's going to die.
Yeah. He's got to get that Oscar before he goes. If he got the Oscar and just died on stage, and he'd just been waiting for that moment, that'd be the greatest exit of all time.
But no, I think that Charlize Theron understands that she's not going to be that quote unquote young forever.
Sure.
And is like, yeah, if there's a time to do this, and she's working with cool filmmakers and like a lot of female filmmakers.
She's doing Ryan's favorite franchise, the Fast and Furious franchise. She's deep in that one. So
yeah, I'm not sure about the hairdresser on that set though.
Her Simple Jack haircut is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Please.
Oh god. It is. I don't know if I could ever watch that movie. That haircut is, oh man. They were like, how do we make her not how do we make her not more intimidating than all of these other men? well, there's only one way to give her the simple Jack haircut, because otherwise she is going to be. I find her more intimidating than Vin Diesel for sure.
Totally.
Either that, or I think it's the How Did This Get Made guys talked about how they've had really bad hairstyles for most of the women in the franchise, and they think it's because all of the leads are bald men, so they have no hairstylists on set. Which I think is kind of amazing.
It's not the worst.
Yeah, and
Well, Paul Walker.
yeah, okay. And,
I wasn't gonna say anything bad. I mean, like he had hair.
yeah, that was it. Yeah, good. That's all. We'll leave that one in there. We leave Paul Walker alone on this podcast.
I wasn't touching Paul Walker. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other like interesting, because you've got all these comic book movies. So we do eventually get to Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman, which I think is a great action vehicle. The second one, not so much. But
Still haven't seen it.
But there's also some of these. There's some kind of sneaky ones in there, and you've got Zoe Saldana, who obviously did Guardians of the Galaxy, and the same with. I'm gonna forget her name. That played Nebula. Totally forgot the
British actress.
Yeah. I've forgotten her name right now. It's just terrible. Nick will be very upset because that's his number one crush on there. But
is it a K name?
let's. You know what? We're gonna look it up because we owe her that much. For this one, and I was thinking the actress whose name I was not remembering, Karen Gillan. You were very close.
It was a K.
But then there are some other ones like Emily Blunt, who shows up in Edge of Tomorrow and just fucking kicks major ass.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Well, and that's another like good connection to this is that she was originally cast as Black Widow in Iron Man 2, and then she got pregnant and was replaced with Scarlett Johansson. Which was like, which is also funny because Edge of Tomorrow, she found out during filming that she was pregnant, but they continued to just film and work their way through it. But yeah, I think she's really great, and I think Zoe Saldana also she shows up in a movie called The Losers, which I really enjoy. Another one of those good ensemble kind of comedic movies. Ben and I were talking earlier about a movie called Red, very similar kind of tone and vibe to both those films. But yeah, it is interesting to watch it, and I think it's becoming more and more, normal and acceptable, and I hope we're going to get more, including the comic book side of things. We've got She-Hulk coming up, but like we've seen it this year even with something like WandaVision or Captain Marvel, where we're getting more and more of these, not just the female characters in these existing universes, but some of the most powerful characters in these universes are these female characters.
Yeah, I think right now you could arguably say the two most powerful people in the MCU are women.
Yes.
Which is cool.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
To rewind a little bit, sure. I one of the things I'm kind of interested in talking about a little bit was that time that you talked about where things fell off
sure.
in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I'm kind of interested in dissecting like what that meant and what that was about, because again, I feel like there were people who were trying. You had Buffy.
Mm-hmm. You had TV was doing it.
TV was doing it. Yeah, you had Buffy, and even and that's action, obviously. Then later on, like Firefly and everything along those lines. Like I said, all of the Joss Whedon stuff, and sure. Then you had movies like Alien Resurrection, strangely enough, also written by Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
Where they were trying to make an existing character even more badass, like trying to like find a way to manipulate.
Sure.
Give the girl extra powers or something along those lines, which that's kind of, I look at it in retrospect now and I feel like that was something that should have been a red flag of us being like, why is it that they're just like, give the girl more powers and make her cooler, and like what
that was
what
the advent of the term Mary Sue, which is not a term I love because I think that there are so many male Mary Sues
sure.
that it's fucking ridiculous. But yeah, I think that's also that's part of that action landscape though as well in the late 90s, because that's when you make that first you had to shift briefly into westerns again with two OK Corral movies with Tombstone and Wyatt Earp. And then you go directly into the Bay era, which, you know, and
Right.
Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer are owning things with The Rock and Con Air and Nicolas Cage as an action star. And I think it was a weird time just in general for
Goddamn
action
right.
movies. But yeah, I'm really glad that you were opening a Pabst. You're opening a Pabst while you said that.
I heard Matt say Nicolas Cage action star, and I just opened a Pabst Blue Ribbon. I've never felt more American in my life.
And somewhere Nicolas Cage just got his wings. But
He shed a single tear.
yeah, it's interesting to kind of that action landscape is such a strange one, and it's something that I think it would take more time to really like look at these, because I'm sure we're missing things. Like I didn't think about Gina Davis, but it's so funny because I made a Last Kiss Goodnight joke during the previews of the movie we just watched, but I didn't even think like that didn't pop into my head.
Gina Davis was like the bona fide star of that period. I mean, she had a track record of hey, I can, you know, anchor an action movie.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and we've talked about Black Widow, and
she was also married to Renny Harlin, which didn't help things, but also didn't hurt things because I mean, Long Kiss Goodnight is a legit fucking amazing film.
Absolutely. And you know what? I found out recently, like
Written by Shane Black,
that people shit on that movie, and I always consider
that
that
movie
to be
is
a fucking
amazing.
great flick. But then I wondered if I had these, like, I need to go back and watch it.
No. It got great reviews. People love that movie.
Man, I don't know where it was, but I was looking something up, and it was on like a bunch of lists of like shitty.
Got a gun out of that pocket.
So good. It's such a good
right.
flick. But yeah, I'm wondering if there are other ones that I'm not thinking of or that I'm missing in this on kind of the female action star stuff, because it seems like there are these big stretches between it. And Scarlett Johansson is actually a good one to think about. With Lucy was a fucking great kick-ass movie, and then Ghost in the Shell, not so great.
Never saw that.
I just in general was not well received for many reasons. But it is outside of kind of these Marvel movies. It's in Wonder Woman.
Now you have like Jennifer Garner, who's
Yeah.
doing like action movies and things like that. So
You mean Jennifer Lawrence?
Jennifer Garner?
Jennifer Garner did Alias originally, which she was fucking very kick-ass.
Yes, but she's recently gone back to doing like revenge movies and stuff like that.
I
Yeah.
didn't even know that. I that's one I did want to bring up because we did see a lot of female-led action on TV.
Yeah,
In that
Alias.
lead-in areas, but Alias was a fucking phenomenally good female-led show that just
Wasn't Alias
J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams? Yeah.
Yep. Alias has a great story of how it came to be. When they were trying to break the story for when they was working on Felicity, they had one episode when she was in college where it's like she's going to be a spy, and then he was like, oh, what if Felicity was a spy? And that was the pitch for Alias, and they made Alias based off of that, and
Wow.
made amazing things with it. But yeah, it is very interesting to think kind of. I'm interested to see where it goes, just because I think it's always good to see the action genre go in an interesting way or do something different or interesting.
Sure.
It's tricky that the genre doesn't reset itself often enough. And then other times it's rewarded with something like Mad Max Fury Road isn't really reinventing the wheel, but it is doing what has been done in the past so well that it's just fucking great.
Sure. And I think that, I mean, there are other movies that, like, obviously, like, The Matrix put kind of Carrie-Anne Moss
Sure.
on the same level footing as Lawrence Fishburne or Keanu Reeves as being a very powerful, physically powerful,
Yes.
female lead. And so, even though that's not one of Matt's favorite movies,
I'm excited for the new one, which we should see a trailer at some point here.
Who knows?
Shot both of them already?
Yeah,
We'll see.
Who really knows? But yeah, it's always kind of a moving target. I do think it's interesting that's evolved, and I feel like one thing I will say is that it's been non-action movies. I feel like it's been female leads in non-action movies that have kind of led to some of those sea changes. Like I think that like Sharon Stone, Basic Instinct,
Jodie Foster and
in Silence of the Lambs, like characters like that ended up paving the way for the female action star almost as much as those who kind of blaze those trails, in like the Sigourney Weavers and Gina Davises of the world, just because they were kind of linchpins of their own films and realized that they were in power.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't a scary thing or a bad thing. Like, we have these movies that were successes with these women that held positions of power. And I think that kind of naturally translated to the action medium.
Well, it's also those movies appealing to a wider audience. So
Sure.
Instead of it being this idea of a chick flick or whatever, where it pigeonholed and it's mostly women going to see this movie. It's not the case with these. These are movies that universally are loved by both sexes, and everyone's going to see it and get into them.
Yeah. If anything, I think Renny Harlin was probably just a little too ahead of his time.
I mean, Cutthroat Island
Island
is pretty terrible. And he made a pirate movie at the worst time you could make a pirate movie.
1995?
Yeah, it was just... I mean, it ruined Pirates again until Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
which then ruined Pirates as well. Pirates has... It's like that flower that like blooms for just like 6 hours and then it's over. Your window for good pirate movie is very narrow. And then you're in anti-pirate territory.
You could probably look this up right now, but I was arguing with somebody that they had it backwards because Cutthroat Island was a huge, like $150 million budget and was a huge flop. He made Long Kiss Goodnight right after it.
All right. You want me to determine if he actually did those in that order?
Yes, because somebody else told me, no, you did Long Kiss Goodnight first.
I think you are correct, but let's look up...
I believe that Cutthroat Island is 95 or 96, and that Long Kiss Goodnight is 97 or 98.
So, in 1995, Cutthroat Island was released, and in 1996, The Long Kissed Goodnight was released. And then it was a long way down.
For Renny Harlin?
Yeah.
What is it? Deep Blue Sea.
I mean... I do love me some deep.
I mean, who doesn't, right?
But it is a nonsensical, ridiculous movie.
Oh, of course not.
It's always hard because there are some really terrible movies out there that we applaud and love for being so ridiculous. But it's also like we shouldn't be positively reinforcing these things.
I mean, if you look at just the cast of Deep Blue Sea, you're like, oh, we got Stellan Skarsgård, we've got Samuel L. Jackson, we got Thomas Jane,
LL Cool J, Michael Rappaport.
Michael Rappaport. I mean, shut it down.
Yes,
Best
that is
cast
the thing you should have done. You should have shut it down.
Best
You are
cast
correct.
of all time.
Well, that'll go back for another one of our guilty pleasures podcast. I think we've already covered that one pretty in depth. Sadly,
I think that you've us just mentioning it right now is enough for us to cover Deep Blue Sea.
But yeah, I think it's great, and I like that we got to go see. I think also the fact that that Black Widow looks like it's got a big opening. It's funny because I felt like making a joke earlier to be like, God damn it, Ben, how dare you? How dare you? I know exactly what you're thinking, and I just you make this really difficult sometimes. Let's just backtrack. We're almost there. We're so close. God almighty. I'm glad.
This is what people don't pay for.
I know. Yeah, this is why we don't have a Patreon. But we will have an OnlyFans by the end of the week.
Shit, yeah.
Last Pine OnlyFans. It's a lot of butt crack. It's mostly just butt crack.
It's just butt crack.
Just lots of butt crack. No,
ass to ass.
I was. Oh man. Oh boy. I was gonna say that Ben and I went to help a fledgling dying studio tonight by going to see a little known movie by this little studio called Disney. But I also at the same time was thinking it actually is kind of important to be getting back out there. And I know that's so backwards in your mind, but movies back in the theaters are only going to survive if the this is the ecosystem, and if there is no Orca out there, everything else cannot exist. So I'm glad to see that Black Widow not only is having a big almost got me into it again. Is getting a great box office.
Don't listen to Steven Dorff. It's fine to go see Black Widow.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I want to talk for hours about the Steven Dorff article. Oh my god! And just when I was starting to like him again with True Detective,
I like Steven Dorff.
I do. That article is another one of the fucking Scorsese. Steven Dorff came out and said Scarlett Johansson should be embarrassed by doing something like Black Widow because these movies are the end of cinema.
I'd rather do a movie, from a 23-year-old who's going to be the next Kubrick or something like that. I'm just like, well, actually, the people who are in all these Marvel movies have worked with those people, so.
Yeah, and it's not like this director is a fucking powerhouse director either at this point. They go with these small, but anyway, it drives me nuts.
It's a.
Oh, what are you going to say?
You just sound like a pirate. It drives me nuts.
I'm just happy that we have, because I was a little worried watching the Fast franchise open back up in the theaters a couple weeks ago and not
killing
really
it.
Do much, and In the Heights flopped, and there's just a lot of things that were kind of concerning. So I'm glad to see a big movie do better and make some money. I also think, and this is a little off topic, but I think the Disney model is so far superior to the HBO Max model as far as getting the right people, because you can watch Black Widow right now if you want to pay $30 at home, or you can watch it in the theater, and that's a good mix for most people to kind of dissuade you or persuade you to watch it in one of those locations, versus HBO Max is just saying you've got a subscription. Like, you want to watch Dune, you better want to watch it in the big screen, which I do, and I will go see Dune in the big screen.
Wow.
But
bet your ass we're watching Dune on the big screen. I'm not watching that show on my TV.
But that it is, I look at some of these movies that maybe aren't going so big, and I wonder if that is why we're not getting people kind of back in the theaters yet. But I don't know.
I think that there's going to be some sort of paradigm shift at some point where it's. The bubble has to pop at some point where we're like, are we going to watch this shit at home, or are we going to go back to the movies? And I think that Black Widow was a perfect reintroduction, like coming back to the movies, because it was a great big screen experience.
And
it was a great movie to see with people.
Well, and I think word of mouth is going to be good on it, and that's important as well, because it was a bit of a gamble. Part of the reason they sat on it for a year is that Black Widow is not their marquee character.
Yeah, it's not
it's
not Iron Man.
It takes place before the movies we saw, but I think also we've had a really good paving of the way with the TV series and the MCU really kind of getting people excited to watch these things. So I hope, and it's gonna be great. We've got the 10 Rings movie coming out later this year. We have the Eternals coming out later this year. We have 2 more fucking kind of gamble Marvel movies. I'm very curious to see where they go.
Yeah, I'm most interested in seeing Dune, though.
I am as well. I cannot fucking wait for that movie.
I
can't describe how excited I am for that.
Just seeing a Denis Villeneuve Dune movie is gonna be.
I literally saw a trailer for a kind of shitty movie with Hugh Jackman tonight, and all I kept thinking of is, I wish this was Prisoners. I just wish I could go back and watch that movie in the screen instead. So that's where I'm going to leave us for tonight. And don't watch Old. It looks terrible. The new M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Or do watch it and just write in your thoughts. Because we will read them live on the air.
You know what? I will say this. We will hire any of our listeners. We will send you free beer if you agree to watch Old and call in with your review and maybe a description of the plot, because I think that would be alone very funny.
Yeah, I'm down. I'll ship beer or whatever. I'll
I
do what I
thought
need
Ben
to
was
do.
volunteering. He's like, beer? Yeah, I'll do it. And they're like, no, you're already on the show. We're already doing that. But
So if you missed out, okay, so you're gonna get free beer, and
Yes.
all you have to do is watch a movie and call in about it.
yeah, you got it, but you got to like spend some time. You got to invest in this movie and give us a good plot synopsis and your unbiased review.
The movie is called Old.
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 It's not Old Balls, which I did think would be a better movie about John Reinsvold's balls. But I think, just Old is the name of the movie, not Old Boy. Not
Why are you looking at me like that, mommy? It's oh my god. M. Night Shyamalan is totally fucking with us now. It's just
the trailer legit looks like it's from Tropic Thunder in one of the fake movie trailers that they made for that movie. It's so bad. But just tell us, send us a text or email or however you want to smoke signal, and we will put you in. You will be our old correspondent for one night on the podcast.
but we should make them dress up like they're old for when they go see it.
Oh my god, that would be amazing. We'll more to come on that. We want to thank you so much for listening to us this week on the New Way. I've got a burp brewing here.
We're gonna workshop this.
There we go. I want to thank you so much for listening. We'll be back again with new episodes like we have been almost all summer.
Almost.
I think we missed a week or two.
Yeah, we missed one week.
But we'll be back, and we hope to hear from you then. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.